months because they were like hard copies, so it's just easier for me to start looking at them. But I am going to go in. Your guys, they're just going to come back through into the classrooms. I'm going to go in. We're going to make edits and stuff on them and corrections and stuff. So when you get it back, make sure you look at the comments and stuff. But you're just going to see it come back through. Return through Google Classroom. You don't have to return it back. Just for you. But I am going to get those. They'll be graded before the 12th because the 12th is like when your grades are posted for the end of the term and things like that. But the ones I looked at look pretty good so far. I didn't make it through the whole thing. But we are starting chapter 3. Chapter 3 is all about rates of change, slope, graphs, linear functions. Have you heard any of those words before? Linear functions are just graphs that are straight lines. So we're getting into how to graph those, what the slope of it means. If you had to guess what slope of a line meant, what would your guess be? Daniel? The diagonal, so just how steep it is. So the bigger your slope is, or the bigger your rate of change is, the steeper your line is, the flatter it is. So today we're going over kind of just discussing and identifying what slope is, and solving some problems like that. So I printed out your notes for you guys. Those of you that are at home should have these just online to follow along. So there's a couple vocab words. I should be sharing the screen. Oh my gosh. Muted all of that. And they didn't even hear anything I said. Good day. I don't know how you will. I think about this. I'm just going to take this. You're welcome. Those of you at home, I was saying that your notes are posted. If you open them up, we're starting chapter 3, which is all about linear equations, slopes, rates of change, and things like that. So your notice for rate of change says how one quantity changes in relation to another. So it kind of goes back to the idea of a rate and the proportion stuff that we did at the end of chapter 2. So miles per hour, feet per second, how much one thing changes in relation to the other. We have 3 different ways to calculate a rate of change. We're going to look at some graphs. When you're looking at a graph, you're going to pick out 2 coordinate points, and it's always the vertical change divided by the horizontal change. So how far up and down are you moving, divided by how far left to right you're moving. Typically, we have vertical change over horizontal change. We can kind of shorten that wording and say the rise over the run. But you do want to make sure you're dividing it the right way. You have to rise out of bed in the morning before you run for your day. It's your vertical change over your horizontal change. If you're only given... Is it over there? Okay. You see it? Are you sure you left it in here? I don't know where you put it, Aiden. But it would still be right there. I don't think anybody liked it. Fine. If all you're given is 2 coordinate points, subtract the y coordinates, subtract the x coordinates. So you would have an x1, y1, and then x2, y2. All those little tiny numbers mean is that this is the first coordinate point, this is the second coordinate point. So you subtract the 2 y values, subtract the 2 x values. It's the same thing as looking at your graph and saying how far up and down are you moving, how far left or right. And then using a table where you're just organizing your points differently, you do the same thing. Grab 2 sections, subtract out the y values, subtract out the x values, and you get your slope or your rate of change. Whenever you're, well, I guess either option that you're looking at, whether it's the graph or 2 points, you always want to start with the coordinate point that is leftmost on the graph, right? If you think about reading, you read left to right. So you would always start with the point that you come across first, because you want to make sure the sign of your number, or the sign of your slope makes sense. A positive number means your line is increasing, a negative number means your line is decreasing. Take them out of order, you're going to kind of flip-flop that stuff. There we go. So once we get all this stuff in, there's 2 problems down below. We're going to look at a steady rate of change in the first graph, and then an inconsistent rate of change in the second graph. if you're done, you can take a look just at that first graph that says healthy ride. You're comparing number of months to total cost of the healthy bike ride. Try to see if you can put that stuff that you just wrote down into math down there. So what would your rate of change be? So how many, or what is the number of dollars per month that you would pay? When you're talking about rate of change, that's the kind of stuff you're talking about. How does the Y change for one change in X? You have a graph, you have a table, we wrote down ways to find it in the top and the bottom. If you're confused, it's okay. Just to give you something to start thinking about while we finish up writing things down. What do you think the rate of change would be in that first table? Another way to say it is, how much is it for 1 month? The slope of the line, what's your increase? So if we look at that graph, we're given different options. We have the graph here, we have the table. So if I start writing in, I only have 3 options here. So we can pull out nice and easy numbers from the table. So your easiest number is to always take out 0. So in 0 months, you take out $0. There's a bunch of different points we can take out of that line. A couple of them are easier. So what's a different coordinate point that we can pull out of the graph? Caitlin?
For 10 months. Then 120.
So I noticed the one that's given to me here for 10 months, there's $120. I'm gonna put it here because that's the last point on the graph. So I want to keep my numbers in order. So I'm gonna find something in between 0 and 10 also. But for 10 months, I have $120. And then what's another one that we can see?
5 months.
For 5 months, that's the one I picked too because you can see it nice and easy. What's the cost for 5 months? $60. So when we're talking about the rate of change, if we wanted to use the graph, you pick 2 points. So I'm going to call this point A and point B, and you just have to figure out the vertical change. So I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but you have to pay attention to what you're counting by because I'm not going up 6 units. If I'm counting by tens here, I'm going up by how many units? 60, because I'm counting by tens. By 10, 20, 30, so I have 60 as my vertical change. As my horizontal change, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I start thinking about rate of change, my rise over run is 60 over 5, which produces what? 60 divided by 5. So the slope of your line is 12, your rate of change is 12. That means it's $12 per month. It all means the same thing. We can find that in the table also. Tables are just coordinate points. So this would be your first coordinate point, x1, y1. This could be your second coordinate point, x2, y2. So if we think about what we wrote down on the beginning, subtract out your 2 coordinates. Y2 minus y1. 60 minus 0 is just 60. 5 minus 0 is just 5. And you can see you do the same thing. Simplifies into 12. You could pick these 2. You could choose this as your first coordinate point and this as your second coordinate point. 120 divided by 60 is still 60. 10 divided by 5 is still 5. So it doesn't matter what you pick, but you want to make sure you're taking the second point minus the first point so your sign is right. We have an increasing line, so I have $12 per month. That's the slope, that's the rate of change. That's your constant slope, or your constant rate of change. No matter what 2 coordinate points you pick, you're always going to get 12. The second graph, you're going to notice it's a little bit different. I have 3 coordinate points, so if I just look at this first point, A to B, my vertical change is 10 and 20. My horizontal change is 2. So what's the slope of the line from A to B? If you find your rise over your run, you get 20 over 2. What's your first slope? 10, 10. And this is just something where your rates are changing. So from 0 to 2 months, it's $10 per month. Then I have point B to C. I can count my change there on 1, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's the same as the graph we did over here. Rise over run is 60 over 5, which is 12. So from 2 to 7 months, I'm $12 per month. Then I can look at my last piece, point C to D, 1, 10, 20, 30 over 2. So from month 7 to month 9, what's your cost per month? Sorry? 15. Because when I do rise over run, we get 30 divided by 2, which is 15. So you can see it, if you look closely at the graph, it's not a nice straight line. Your slopes are different, you get steeper as you go. The smaller my number is, the less steep my line is. You can see I'm kind of climbing up. Could do the same thing down here. First coordinate point is 0, 0. Then I had this point of 2, 20. Then I had 7, 80, and 9 to 110. And if we went through and subtracted out, we would have gotten the same thing. 20 minus 0 over 2 minus 0. Simplifies out to what we just did here. 80 minus 20, 7 minus 2. You get the same thing we just did by counting. 110 minus 80, 9 minus 7, same thing we just here, just different ways of looking at it. Okay, go with that. Pretty simple. Flip it over. We're not gonna go, I don't know why there's two graphs here. You're gonna have to look at that one, they mean the same thing. But what you do wanna be familiar with is that if your line is decreasing, then you have a negative change. So that's what I was saying before, that you have to make sure when you're finding slope, you're always starting with the leftmost point. So you wanna pick a left point as being your point A or your first coordinate point. And then you can pick any other point to the right of it. But if you subtract it out backwards, your sign's gonna be wrong, and something that might be showing a negative slope isn't gonna work out. So if I wanna find my rate of change for my balance in my bank account compared to months, pick out two coordinate points. I picked out this one because it's easy, so I have that month 0, you have $800. So that's my X1, Y1. Okay, this means that's your first coordinate point. To pick any other coordinate point, what other coordinate point do we want to pick out?
There's no month 0.
There's no month 0, right, but that's saying that right away, January 1st at the beginning, you didn't make it all the way to the end of January yet. So like at the very beginning of January, right as the year starts, you have $800 in your bank account. By the end of January, you went through the whole first month. That's what that means. Okay, so at time 0, I guess you can say. Before you start moving and paying your bills and working through January, no time moved, you didn't spend any money. So this is what you got right away, January 1st.
April, 600.
So I saw that one too. So I can see April is this coordinate point. What month is April? The 4th month. So by the end of your 4th month, you have $600 in your account. So you want to see how the numbers are changing. And again, you can't be in the habit of just always picking out the bigger numbers because we are decreasing here because you're spending money. So second coordinate point means take your y values and subtract them. 600 minus 800 over your change in x, 4 minus 0. 600 minus 800 is negative 200, so it's really important you can't forget your sign. 4 minus 0 is just 4. So then when we simplify that and reduce it out, what's my rate of change? Negative 200 divided by 4. Negative 50. So what that means is that negative means we're spending or we're losing $50 per month. So let's phrase it as spending 50 per month, which is a really good budget plan to only be able to spend $50 a month, especially as an adult with all of the bills. Okay? So again, just pay careful attention. You pick a point to the left first and then the right. If you mess it up, say you did flip-flop these and do 800 minus 600, 4 minus 0, and end up with a positive number, you can just look at your graph and see that it's decreasing and throw a negative sign in front of your number. You're going to get the same thing. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. Okay? Also clarify, I don't have to phrase this as saying spending negative $50 because spending is a negative word. So spending a negative amount would technically mean that you're gaining money. So I don't need to put that negative sign in there if I'm using the verbiage of spending or losing or things like that. Good with all that. Next two problems are just straightforward. Find the slope of the line that contains the following points. So first we have to plot the points. So how do I plot negative 3, 2? This is my first coordinate point. How do I plot it? You've seen graphs like this before where you have all 4 quadrants? So if I start at 0, 0, what do I do first?
Go over -3.
Go over to -3. And then,
Go up +2.
right. That's how far left or right. That's how far up or down. So go to the left, 1, 2, 3, and up 2. Plot your second point. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then as best you can, connect your, you want it to be straight, but maybe it's a little funky. So then you have 2 methods of finding your slope. You can count the squares like we did. You can count your horizontal change over, or your vertical change over your horizontal change, or you could use your formula. Subtract out your x values or your y values. 5 minus 2 over 5. Be careful with your negatives because you're always subtracting, but in this case, we're subtracting a negative. So then I get 3 over 8. You can check by doing your counting. I go up 1, 2, 3, up 3, and then over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, over 8. So then do the same thing to find your slope for B. Do it by counting, do it by subtracting the numbers. For vertical change over horizontal change. I guess you can do B, C, and D. I don't have them all in here. And then would you guys want to come up to the board to do B, C, or D? Or just wait over them? Doesn't matter either way. Everyone seems to do with either option. Yep. If both are negative, so when you come to do this, go to the left 3, 1, 2, 3, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4. And plot your first point. So find your slope for B, C, and D. No, so it needs to be the vertical change on top and the horizontal change on the bottom. But then you have to see if you're decreasing, it's negative. So whichever direction you're moving down. Yeah. There's always subtraction, but then your second doesn't do that. If you're subtracting a negative, it's turned into a addition, but you're still subtracting it. It's your 2y coordinates and your 2x coordinates. But it's always your second point minus your first point. The 8 and 4, and then the 2 and 3. So -8 minus -4 is -8 plus. If you're negative, we add 4 to it. -4. -2 plus 3. Right. I am gonna go over B because I see us kind of half split. Our graphs are right, so I see us going -3, 4, and then I have -2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But I see us kind of counting backwards and doing the wrong thing. So if you're counting the graph, you have to count your vertical change first. So from point A to point B, moving up or down, how do I get from A to B? Do I go up or do I go down? Okay. I'm going down, and then how many units are we going down? So if I count, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So to show that you're going down 4 units, you have -4. And then from A to B, how far left or right? Okay. 1. And it's to the right. So right and up are positive directions, left and down are negative directions. So since I moved to the right 1, that's a positive 1. So you get a slope of -4. So if you flip-flopped it and did 1, 4. You would get the same thing if you subtracted it. -8 minus -4 over -2 minus -3. 2 negatives make a big plus sign. -8 plus 4 is -4. -2 plus 3 is 1. You get the same thing either way. You have to make sure you're counting your vertical change first. So when you come down to look at C, and you plot your points, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. These ones get a little bit funky. So my definition of slope is to figure out what your rise is and divide it by what the run is. So how far did you move vertically divided by how far you moved horizontally. So if I label this point A and point B just so that it's easier for us to talk about it, what is my vertical change from A to B? Daniel? My vertical change. Caroline? 0. So from A to B, I didn't move up or down at all. They're on the same level. So my vertical change is 0. What's my horizontal change from A to B? That's your 5. So you're moving 5 to the right, which is a positive 5. What is 0 divided by 5? 0. So if you have a horizontal line, you always have a slope of 0 because there's no vertical change. Not moving up or down at all. Take a look at D. Plot your 2 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Up 2. And then 7 down 1. So now we have a vertical line. Again, to find the slope, I need to find the vertical change over the horizontal change. What's my vertical change from A to B? Again?
3.
3. Is it positive or negative?
Positive.
So from A to B, am I going? Right, I'm going down. So it's -3. And then what is the horizontal?
0.
Right, I didn't move left or right at all. It's -3 divided by 0.
0.
Type in your calculators. Yeah. What did you get? That's okay, when you both kind of get the same thing. You can't take a number and divide it by 0, right? If you think about it, if I take 3 and divide it into one group, I can do that. I have 3 pieces in a group. If I take 3 and divide it into 2 groups, I have 1.5 pieces in each group. If I take 3 pieces and don't divide it into any groups, do I still have one group? I have 3 items, and I split them up 0 ways. If but I still have one group. So you cannot take a number and divide it by 0. That is undefined. You're not able to do it. Mathematically, you can't take a number and split it up to make everything disappear, right? Dividing by 1 means you want one group. Dividing by 2 means you want 2 groups. I can't create 0 groups because no matter what, I still have that first group of 3 that is my one group. Can't take anything and make it all disappear by dividing by it. Okay? Vertical lines always have undefined slopes because you can't divide by 0. Horizontal lines always have slopes of 0. Okay? Good with that? You flip, your homework is all attached. You have about 15 minutes to work on that in here. Remember that you guys come back in tomorrow for study hall to work on it. You guys at home can stay in here to work or just pop back in if you come across questions.
Which page? So, like what one subtracting, but would you still undefined?
Because you would end up getting, look, 7 minus 7. 7 minus 7. 0. Yeah, so the homework is the whole rest of that that's attached. So some of them on that last page might get a little bit difficult, but that's what I'm saying. Remember that you're coming back in tomorrow morning, you have study on here. Bring it in, work on it, ask questions in here, work together in here. It's just the next.